The files for Phase 2 of Season of Discovery have been released. Updates to the class tuning have been released today, including some Mage rune being found and then disabled, some books being found, some things being found pretty much, but then being disabled. A lot of stuff has happened, and with all of this information that we've gathered, I have consulted with my guild, who is one of the top speed all-stars and one of the top execution all-stars when it comes to Phase 1 of Season of Discovery, and we have created our tier list for what we think is going to be great for progression rating in Phase 2. Progression is different from farm, because it's mostly for the people who are going to be rushing into normal ground and clearing it in that first reset. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. First up, we have our mages. Now, obviously, utility isn't going to come into a huge question when it comes to mages because they pretty much share the same thing. None of the specs really bring something that the other doesn't in terms that helps the raid, besides Fire Mage, which does bring improved Scorch, making your Destruction Warlock really like you. Arcane doesn't really bring too much. In fact, it sucks resources from other classes, and Frost is, Frost. In terms of our tier list of where they're going, Fire is going to be going to the A tier, Arcane is going to be going to the B tier, and Frost is going to stay in our D tier, which is also going to be known as Other Spec is way better. The reason for this is because if we simply look at the Mage Discord, if you go to the pins, they have already run sims on what we can expect in terms of damage from all three specs. Currently, Fire is looking like it's on top by about 50 DPS at 30 seconds, jumping to almost 100 DPS at 60 seconds. Arcane is second behind for those numbers, and then Frost really wasn't even simmed because it's just not good in terms of PvE. It's mostly just a PvP spec, just like Subtlety. Arcane Healer is covered mostly in another video, but if you want to know the damage numbers, it's not too crazy far behind Arcane. At 30 seconds to 60 seconds, it's pretty much 100 to 150 DPS lower than the just pure Arcane damage if you're playing as the healer. So it's not too big of a difference. It's kind of what you would expect. But in terms of reigning king of DPS, it's going to be Fire Mage, which boosts them even more because they're being more likely to be brought because they're bringing improved Scorch for Destruction Warlock, which is currently looking to be doing really good. Just a quick hint of the future of the tier list. So because of that, Fire is up here in A tier because it's doing the most damage among all the specs, and it brings that improved Scorch to help out the Destruction Warlock. And obviously all of the utility that a mage brings because mages. Next up, we have our Ret Paladin. Our Ret Paladin is going to be put into A tier. So if we go ahead and look at Ret Paladin, they have some really nice options in terms of their talents that they're going to be getting, except for the last talent, which kind of sucks. Most likely it's going to be put into Divine Strength. But really nice talents otherwise that they will be able to unlock in terms of their runes that they'll be getting. They'll be getting Sheath of Light and Guarded by the Light. Sheath of Light helping them get some more damage to their holy abilities, and Guarded by the Light helping them regenerate some mana so that they don't run in the middle of a fight. Really nice for Retribution Paladins. However, their damage isn't going to be at the very top, which is why they're mostly in A tier, as their utility is mostly the reason why they are being brought in their blessings. Currently, it's looking like Paladin is looking to be the best tank, so to get both blessings, we're going to be bringing a Ret Paladin along, as again, they bring the second blessing, and they bring a lot of utility. And they're the worst DPS either. Next up, we have our rogues. A lot of people are rating rogues kind of way higher than they should be rated, in my opinion. people are putting them in A tier, if not S tier, for some ungodly reason. However, today we did figure out, which does help rogues, that the bosses in Gnomeregan are not going to be immune to poisons, bleeds, and diseases, which really helps out rogues. However, they are going to be resistant to them. So it's not going to be like this completely remove the immunities, but it's going to definitely help out the damage because you're still doing damage, it's just reduced. The issue with rogues, and why I haven't really even bothered to go to this and what the runes are, which by the way, the runes are pretty bad, the new runes specifically, for the build that they would be going, is because there's not really a reason to bring, as we'll get into later, a rogue over a warrior. Rogue doesn't really bring any utility outside of improved exposed armor, which you're not going to be going, as you will be going down pretty much the full combat tree. I will say though, something that's really nice for rogues is that Mutilate did get buffed. Instead of 60 energy, it costs 40 energy, which is going to be really, really nice. And it's going to be 100% beating out Saber Slash now in terms of DPS. But because you don't really beat Warrior in damage, and Warrior brings utility, progression raids most likely are not going to be bringing a rogue. In terms of farm, it's going to be totally fine, because I can totally see rogue still being like number 5 top DPS, but again, warrior is going to be like higher, and it brings utility. So why would I bring a rogue over a warrior? And because of that, it's really just going to be sitting down and probably in B tier, because again, its damage is good, it just isn't there's better options. When you get to farm, it'll be brought when they can't find a warrior to fill the spot. So it's not the end of the world. Plus, you're going to be really good in PvP, so have fun in PvP. Assassination Rogue is not going to really be played. You're just going to be going the combat role for progression rating specifically. But so it's going to be staying in the other spec. It's way better tier. Feral DPS. Feral DPS is going to be going to the pretty much top of our A tier. The issue Feral DPS are having and why they're not in S tier is because for progression rating, most guilds are going to be having you run all the way to leader of the pack, which means you cannot go for power shifting. This is going to be reducing your damage, however, it's going to be increasing your raid's damage. And because you kind of have to pick between the two, it's really an overall kind of hit to how good you are, even though Alliance raids are going to be bringing you 100% of the time because they want that Wind Fury buff. So that is why you are at the top of the A tier, because you lose power shifting and you kind of have to choose between power shifting or leader of the pack. You're brought down to the top of A tier, but you don't quite make it into that S tier spot. In terms of your runes that you're getting Berserk, which is really nice, and King of the Jungle, which will buff your Tiger's Fury, also really nice runes. But again, that choice between power shifting and leader of the pack is why you're ultimately brought down to the top of A tier, is not quite making it into that S tier. In terms of balanced druids, if you watch the healer video, balanced druids are going to be in the C tier for the pure reason of if you are playing a resto druid, you are pretty much going to be playing a balanced druid, except the only difference is that you're going to be running wild growth. And I guarantee you that spot is for casters is going to go to a caster that does more damage than you when you bring pretty much the same thing as a resto druid, except they run wild growth and you run sunfire. As well as once we get past progression, even though this is a progression tier list, there's also an option for progression, but it's probably not going to be happening. Resto druids can really just go down the balance tree and just pretty much be balanced with wild growth, but I still consider that a resto druid because they're there to heal. Because of that, balance is going to be in C tier because resto druid just pretty much does your job and then some. And it's just not really worth the spot. Next up, we have Ellie, which is going to go up to the C tier. I I know a lot of people, I know I don't have too much knowledge on Shaman. However, we've done a ton of research. Again, we did this with my guild. It's not looking good for Ellie Shamans in this phase. They do get some nice talents and abilities in terms of utility. The runes that they got, though, are not amazing. They get Power Surge, sharing it with the Resto Shaman. It's the 5% chance is really what kind of hurts this. They get really nice mana regen, but it's only a 5% chance to get that instant proc from your Flame Shock. And that's really what's killing the good part of this talent. You've got Fire Nova, which is going to be really nice for trash, but in terms of actually killing what matters, which is the boss, the 5% free thing is kind of underwhelming. And in terms of your feat slot, you really don't get anything. I don't know if they just didn't data mine the Ellie Shaman one, but like the top one's obviously for Resto Shaman. The bottom one is obviously for Tank Shaman. And so all we're left with is a Decoy Totem, which doesn't help Shamans in terms of damage at all. So because of that, and they're not really going to increase too much in terms of damage from phase 1 because their runes are amazing. They're going to be down in C tier, as you would much rather bring an Enhancement Shaman tank, even a Resto Shaman, or an Enhancement DPS, as we will get here in a second, as I forgot to bring it up actually. But Enhancement DPS is going to be going roughly in B tier, mostly because of the sims that have been happening. So they get really nice talents, as I covered in the tank video, in terms of Maelstrom Weapon. However, the feat, again, same thing with Ellie Shaman now is the issue. Not much of a thing, but Maelstrom Weapon's really good. They also have the option of going, I think it got turned into a book, which is why they removed it. They get a nice book for two-handed shamans or two-handed enhancement if they want to run it. It's just in terms of the sims that have come out, it's not looking very good for enhancement shaman in terms of the damage numbers that it's outputting. But it's not terrible. It still brings Wind Fury, but it's probably not going to be brought because the enhancement shaman take is just doing better in terms of pure DPS enhancement shaman. As well as Feral DPS, the competitor for Wind Fury, is also going to be doing more damage. Now for Warlocks, I know you've heard me say it a little bit. The tank, my bad. Affliction is going to stay in the other spec as way better tier, because if we go to Affliction, their talent tree is pretty bad. And in terms of the runes that they get, none of them really help Affliction and where it needs. Demonic Knowledge is good in terms of spell damage, but Destruction can benefit from that as well. And in terms of the ways to get Invocation, which really is just a quality of life rune, it doesn't really increase your damage, not nearly enough as they would need to compete with Destruction. And because of that, they're just stuck in this other spec as way better tier, because Destruction is going to be going to the second spot in our A tier, because all of their runes that they're going to be getting are going to be insane. And they get Shadow and Flame, which is your critical strikes with fire and shadow spells increase your fire and shadow damage done by 10% per 10 seconds. And they get Demonic Knowledge, which is really nice. If they want, they can go Dance in the Wind, although that's probably more for tanks. And they have Shadow Flame if they want to for AoE. Currently, their sims are looking really good, and because of that, they're sitting in this A tier because of their damage and obviously Warlock utility. Next up, we have everybody's favorite class of Warrior. As you may have heard earlier, for the Rogue section, the Nomergon mobs are no longer going to be immune to bleeds, which means our Arms Warriors aren't going to be crying because their Deep Wounds doesn't work 100%, because the Nomergon mobs still are resistant to poisons, bleeds, and diseases. So it's not going to be doing as much damage as if it wasn't resistant, but at least it's not immune. However, the issue for Arms Warriors is that Fury Warrior exists. And because of that, Arms Warriors are going to be staying in the other spec is way better tier, and Fury Warriors are going to be reigning supreme. When you are doing your dungeon spam, you probably might be playing Arms Warrior because Sweeping Strikes is going to be great, but in terms of actual progression of the raid, you're going to be sticking with Fury Warrior. Fury Warrior is going to be cracked in terms of DPS, as I am sure many of you have heard. It did get nerfed in terms of consumed by rage by 10%. Some people are speculating you might be going Frenzied Assault then, or some people might say you still go consumed by rage, depending on the build, because obviously Frenzied Assault is a two-handed weapon build. So you could be going Frenzied Assault for two-handed build and consumed by rage for one-handed build. In terms of your hands, you have Single Minded Fury for your one-handed, Quick Strike, pretty much same as it was. Probably going to be switching to Flagellation if you haven't already. And for your new runes, they aren't exactly overwhelming, as they are Warrior, and Blizzard has said they want to make things equal to Warrior, and so because of this, the runes they get aren't exactly the most exciting. You're probably going to be running Blood Surge and Rallying Cry, bringing that defensive to your group. Not the most exciting runes, but buffs or rooms nonetheless. But because you are a Fury Warrior, and Fury Warrior bring many damage and utility, you are going to be S tier. Shocker. While Arms is staying in other specs way better. Now we get to our Hunters. BM Hunter, in terms of ranged BM Hunter, is how we're going to be taking it, and Survival is going to be our melee spec, regardless of which talents tree they take. It just makes it easier to differentiate. But BM, in terms of ranged BM Hunter, it's going to be playable, but honestly, the other specs are kind of just looking better. MM and Survival, aka Melee Hunter, are both looking pretty even in terms of their DPS. The only reason that I would move MM Hunter into S tier over Survival Hunter is going to be because our MM Hunter would be going into our melee group and giving them True Shot aura, as well as for progression, typically ranged has it a lot easier and will do more damage, as well as their hunters. In terms of their runes, if you're playing melee hunter, you get melee specialist and melee and dual with speculation. The only issue is that this is a progression tier list, and if you're going straight from leveling right into Nomicron, there's a chance you actually don't even have these runes, which is another reason why marksmanship is in S tier. If you do not have these two runes for melee hunter immediately just drops down here. If you have the runes, that is when it is A tier. Now for our MM, we are pretty much going to be probably sticking with Heart of Lion for the only hunter. There's a chance to go Master Marksman if you're the second hunter. The other hunter is using Heart of the Lion. But for now, we're just going to stick with Heart of the Lion. Obviously, we're going to take Chimera Shot, and for our leg rune, depending on what you take here, it will change. For our feet rune, obviously, though, we're going to be taking Invigoration, because traps, honestly, for hunters at this level just aren't very good, and this will give us some mana regeneration. But for our waist rune, we have the options of either running Expose Weakness, which is going to be pretty nice, but we also have the option of Steady Shot. It's not as powerful as it was in TBC, but it is a nice filler, and it pretty much helps people that are not melee weaving. So if you're not melee weaving and you go Steady Shot, we're going to be running Sniper Training. If you want to melee weave, you're going to be using Expose Weakness and Flanking Strike. Melee Hunter also gets, or not Melee Hunter, Master or Marksmanship Hunter I don't know if I've been saying melee hunter this time I meant master or marksmanship. Gets a really nice talent tree. They get their True Shot aura, they get volley at level 40, and they get some nice spell ranks. The nice thing that Hunter got an improvement to today, though, was that the immunities for Nomergon are not going to be immunities, they're just going to be resistances. And so you can put your Serpent Sting onto these bosses to help with your Chimera Shot. It's not going to be completely gone, but it's going to be reduced. So it's not as bad as it was thought to be, which is in a way good for marksmanship hunters. But because of all of the things hunters bring, including Heart of the Lion, which is really good, it makes your paladin doesn't have to run it. Get that extra talent point for the prop paladin. All of their damage, they have a pet to be able to help out. They get some mana back. They're going to be up here in S tier. Going to be very nice for progression rates. I guarantee you will have one in progression. Next up, and last but not least at the same time, we have our Shadow Priest. This is the spec I will be running, so some might say that there is some bias here. However, I have gone as much as I can in figuring out how this spec can be good and placing it correctly on this tier list. The place it is going to be slotting into on this tier list specifically for progression is going to be the bottom of the A tier. Its damage isn't going to be the best. However, what it does bring is because one of our healers is going to be a priest, okay? Because of that, as Shadow Fiend, by the way, also a really good buff for priest, Shadow Fiend is not a rune on your leg slot, so we don't have to pick between Homunculi and Shadow Fiend. Shadow Fiend is just a book. Every priest gets it. I have heard conflicting statements that it does last for 15 seconds, and some say it just straight up lasts forever, which if it is for them, I think it's a bug, because that seems broken. But, I mean, honestly, Shadow Priest getting a broken ability wouldn't really help their damage buff. This wouldn't help their damage very much, but it would help with their mana situation. But I can bring Homunculi as a Shadow Priest, and it allows my healer priest to bring Prayer of Mending or Barrier, which is really nice. Also on our feet rune, we can get Dispersion if we want to regenerate mana. Probably won't be taken because we're going to hit Shadow Fiend, as well as we can't attack them for 6 seconds. It reduces our damage even further. But we are able to take Pain Suppression to help out our raid. It makes it so we don't have to run 2 priests if there's going to be a lot of take damage, specifically where they get hit with a big damaging ability before the Pain Suppression comes back off a cooldown. Now we have 2 Pain Suppressions to deal with that. Really nice to have. In terms of our waste slot, we're going to get Mind Spike, so we don't have to run Mind Flay, which is going to be very nice. Definitely a big increase, as well as it increases the damage of our Mind Blast on the target. Now, you may have heard me mention that the immunities in Nomergon are going to be going away, so it's going to be resistances, which means that we can Void Plague to get the enemies, but it's going to be resistant a little bit. Either way, we're going to be running Twisted Faith, because it makes Mind Blast deal 50% increased damage, targets with our Shadow Word Pain, which will combo with our Mind Spike, giving us increased crit chance on it. Pretty much, it's always going to be critting, and it's going to be doing 50% more damage. It's going to be really, really nice. In terms of our hand slot, we have the option running Mind Seer for Trash, which is going to scale a lot better than it was before. We get Shadow Word Death, and obviously, as I said before, Homunculi. In terms of our tree, just from Shadow Weaving, Darkness, and Shadow Form alone, we are getting a 45% damage buff. The big reason that Shadow Priest is going to be amazing and why it is in S tier, despite its damage currently even not looking very amazing, is because it brings Vampiric Embrace. Vampiric Embrace, with improved Vampiric Embrace, heals your party for 30% of the damage that you do, and it is not split by 30%, it is 30% to each person in the party. This will enable one healer healing a lot more than it did in phase 1. Like, obviously the people were able to do it in phase 1, but it's probably going to be harder to do it in Nomergon, as the devs said they wanted to make the raid a little bit harder. This will help those single healer comps succeed, as they'll be able to heal pretty much an entire party for 30% of their damage constantly. And I said constantly because not only do they get Shadow Fiend for free, but in terms of Shadow Form, it doesn't say it here, but if you go into game, you will see that Shadow Form is going to be reducing the mana cost of Shadow spells while in Shadow Form by 50%. This is massive for Shadow Priest, as part of the reason, because obviously the other half is damage, but the other half is that they always ran out of mana. They had tons of mana issues. But with this change to Shadow Form plus Shadow Fiend, that part is going to be gone. So now it's really just a damage issue. However, the damage issue is somewhat alleviated in the fact that they're kind of like that supportal DPS spot. They aren't there necessarily for damage, but they're there to provide that little bit of damage, but also provide that little bit of support in terms of the healing it brings. It allows your healer to take prayer bending by taking by being the one that is able to take homunculi, another pain suppression. It's going to be kind of like an augmentation of Ogre from retail, if you can think of it like that. It's that like support spec. It doesn't do a ton of damage, but it helps out in other ways. But instead of making your allies do more damage, it's more of the supportal side, I guess you could say. Because of that, it's going to be sitting at the bottom of the A tier. I don't think you'll see a ton of people bringing it, but the people who do are probably playing for a more defensive composition. Personally, I will probably actually be forced to run Discipline Priest when we do our Nomicron progression, simply because we need a Priest healer to help out. And we're going to be running with our first 10 people that we get, and if I'm in that first 10, for dungeon farming, and I'm just one of the 2 healers because I'm going to be healing for dungeon farming. Only reason I'm going to be running Discipline Priest, but after that I will be swapping to Shadow Priest. But it is totally viable for progression rating if you're looking for that more defensive comp for Nomicron. It's going to be a little bit iffy on the damage and healing side of it, as they did say they were making it harder, and they were kind of disappointed at how Akamai felt in terms of difficulty. It's there for that defensive. Sorry for spending so long on Shadow. I just felt like I needed to explain it because I feel like a lot of people would disagree with the positioning of this, which is totally fine if you do. Again, this is a speculation tier list, and it's purely my opinion, but I believe Shadow Priest is A tier for the reasons I have stated. So, if you disagree with anything, go ahead, leave it in the comments below. If you want to just let me know something, go ahead, also leave in the comments below. If you like the video, make sure you like and subscribe, trying to hit 1,000 subs as soon as possible. And thank you for watching.